So hi everyone. So we're going to get started. So we changed this from a Zoom meeting to a Zoom webinar, which required the login. Hopefully that worked okay for everybody. This is webinar number 7. I know I'm not super creative with giving just numbering them, but we're committed to doing these. Next week will be a little bit more of the same format, and then in 2 weeks we're actually going to do one on a really cool estate planning tool that we think some of our clients should start utilizing. So all right. So the title for today, we are in a recession, does it matter? So that's maybe a little bit of a bold statement. So I'm gonna actually go through some of the data and I guess the short answer of course it matters, but to what degree? So we're gonna dig into that today. So, all right, let me see how I'm gonna advance. Here we go. Disclosures. This is for compliance. All right, next one. So outline for today's conversation. So we're going to talk a little bit about this idea of opening up America again and what that's going to look like. We're going to look at the stimulus package, phase 4, which is coming through right now. We're unemployment. It's at 22, not million dollars, 22 million people. That's my typo. The economy and the stock market, and COVID-19 and some silver linings, and then we're going to wrap up with questions. So hope you guys enjoy this. I try to cut down the slides, but sometimes I can't help myself and I put way too much information in here. But I think I have some good content for today. All right, so this whole idea of opening up America. Clearly, I'm not an expert. I'm not a public health official. I'm not a governor of a state or mayor of a city. But one of the things that it's pretty clear based on the criteria is they have certain things in place. And Trump really is going to allow the states and the cities to make those decisions. And so there are a few things that they've broken this down into. And so kind of from left to right, we'll go through kind of phase 1, which would be called like barely open, which means we'd have a 14-day downward trajectory of these illnesses. And so we'd be in a place where the workplaces and some social settings would reopen with strict social distancing. So schools remain closed. People who are at risk are going to stay isolated. So that's the barely open. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is kind of open. It means workplaces reopen, schools reopen. Now that might be less of an issue because I know schools here and across the country are essentially closed through the fall, or should say late summer. And non-essential travel resume. That's the kind of open. And then phase 3 is the wide open. So in order for us to get through the kind of open, the phase 2 is to start seeing, basically the number of positive tests really decline. And so I think we are seeing some positive news. I know there's a lot of mixed information out there. USC just came up with a study that perhaps many of us are already infected. So there's a lot of more data that's still coming. So that's why we're doing this every week, just to kind of stay in tune. And then the wide open, and I think this is a big area. Once we get back, it's really because if we have this downward trajectory of cases, then it allows the hospitals to not be overrun if we do reopen and we get a spike back of cases. And I think that's what we're really trying to guard against. And clearly, we don't want vulnerable people to be subjected to, really poor conditions, and obviously, we want to make sure they're safe. And so this is a little bit of what we're seeing. So I guess this is a little bit more optimistic because as of last week, as of a few weeks ago, there was none of this talk of it. We kept pushing back the date that we were going to be kind of allowed to go out again. So this is a good sign. And so we'll see how this manifests itself. California seems to be doing a pretty good job, unless we're just not testing. I can't tell. But it seems like we're doing a pretty good job in this. All right, stimulus is massive and more is coming. This is a repeat slide. It's kind of easy to go through this. And so, we talked about phases 1 through 3 of being roughly 2.2 trillion. Phase 4 is on its way. They passed a few items like extending some of the small business relief because some of the programs ran out of money. So they've issued some newer dollars on that. So one of the things we're starting to look at is, are they going to start putting some infrastructure spending, some infrastructure bills in place? What's going to happen on phase 4? But it's continuing to come. This is a kind of a week by week basis. What will be interesting is if we do open up, are they going to put some of these stimulus packages on hold? So some of the things that we're talking about, this is what's expected. And so I don't want to read through this whole piece. This came from Raymond James, some of the things that we're seeing. So The second bullet point on here is the additional 300 to 350 billion in funding for small business lending, 75 billion for hospitals, and 25 billion for virus testing. That's obviously critical to keep our economy moving forward. That money is coming. I think it just got passed today. Funding for state and local governments. So that remains up in the air, but that's going to have to be the next stimulus response, because so many people are filing for unemployment and reserves are starting to get depleted, and states have to run a little bit more of a balanced budget. Plus, they don't have a printing press like the U.S. government has, and so we're going to start seeing some state and local government stimulus. We just haven't seen it yet. And then here's a bunch of the kind of negotiated things that we're still looking at. Further debate. They're talking about mortgage servicer support, payroll tax cut, which is pretty interesting. The payroll tax cut basically would alleviate that payroll taxes paid by individuals plus the employer. When you add both those sides up, it's almost 15%. That would add a lot of relief. And the cool thing with that is actually it's not requiring money to get out to people. It just means people get to keep more of what they're earning. So it's an interesting way, right? What's easier for the government to actually put into place? Sending us money, making sure we get the money, or at the source of making the money, they just don't take it from us and they let us keep more of that money. So payroll tax cut is kind of a hotly debated issue. I know we're fighting on both sides. So I don't know if that will come through. That seems like a reasonable way to get some more stimulus in the system, because you can turn it on and off. You can say, we're going to have payroll tax relief for a month. We're going to have it for 3 months. And they get to control it because they're not sending money out. They just get to change the way money is being withheld. More paycheck support. They are talking about maybe doing some tax changes. So more in the future. I don't have any more updates than that, but we do know that, again, they keep throwing more money at this, and we think that's not going to change anytime soon. All right. So the fun things, 22 million. This was a headline from last Friday. So 22 million jobless claims in a single month. Pretty remarkable, right? I mean, what a scary headline, first of all. We're not in a Great Depression, but this is a scary headline that would signify that. And counting, we're going to have more. The pace of unemployment is slowing, but we're going to have more. One of the things that I don't want to say is a little bit misleading, but it's a little bit challenging. I wanted to give you guys a bit of an update on this. And so being unemployed might help in the short term. So let me talk about that. So what I want to be sensitive to, there are plenty of individuals that are living week to week, paycheck to paycheck, and through this last 5 or 6 weeks have really had serious pain, economic pain. They haven't been able to have enough to pay their bills, maybe put food on the table, whatever that might be. So I don't want to be insensitive to that, but I also want to actually recognize what's going on from an unemployment perspective. So if you filed unemployment and you're on unemployment, let me walk through some of the financial aspects of this, because it's pretty remarkable when you see the massive amount of support that what we would probably deem as lower income workers, what they would get. Now, the reason I say lower income workers, we're starting at minimum wage, so that's as low as you can go, and we're going to work up. So on the left-hand side, I went through an unemployment calculation. I did this last week because I was just wanting to really understand what this dynamic looked like. And so minimum wage, if you're working, so if you're getting a minimum hourly wage, which we use $14.25, I know it's a little bit different in some cities and counties, but in California, $14.25, and working half-time, so 20 hours a week. Then we use minimum wage working 3/4 time, which is 30 hours a week, and then minimum wage working full-time, which is 40 hours a week. So we looked at all those scenarios, and then we said, okay, well, what if you're above minimum wage, making 16 an hour, 18 an hour, 20 an hour? We went all the way up to 35 an hour. Then the next column is annual pay. So we said, all right, what's this annualized pay? Then I broke it down to monthly rate. Then I actually went on to the unemployment website for California and said, what is the unemployment insurance amount that people would collect? So if you're minimum wage half-time, you're getting $143. And then you're getting $214, $285. I did this pretty quick, but I went onto the website. So this is very accurate. I can't say it's 100% accurate, but it's extremely accurate. And then, so we went through, looked at all these payments, and then you can see where it starts to cap out is at these 25 an hour, 30 an hour, 35 an hour. You get up to the maximum of $450. The federal government added on a stimulus piece to unemployment, and basically you get an extra payment through the end of July of $600 a week. So if you take somebody minimum wage working half-time, getting their California unemployment, getting their federal unemployment, that's $743. and you see the annualized estimate. So assuming that people file unemployment in time, we're getting all of their payouts, because I know the 600 didn't come right away. People are eligible for that basically going back to March 29th. And so they'd be eligible for essentially 4 months of this, assuming that this lasts this long and they're on unemployment this long. Look at the amount of pay that people will be receiving in excess of what they would have had they worked. So the reason why I said being unemployed might help in the short term, there's a fair amount of people that are unemployed, not going to work, and actually getting more money in their bank account. They might come out of this financial crisis in a better financial position, because not only are they home, I don't want to say they can't spend money. A lot of the things that we're spending money on is kind of gone away. So again, I don't want to be cavalier about this and say everyone should be doing fine, because clearly they're not. But this is a helpful reminder. If there's stimulus out there, the stimulus is going to help businesses, because we got to keep people working. We got to help individuals. This is a program that is helping individuals. And so I get tired of hearing all of this noise on the news, and it's all bad. It's all terrible. It's about how unemployment is so bad. This is a really good example of, is it really? If you have questions about this, I'm happy to go into details on this. But if this is accurate, which I know it is, I double checked it. Unemployment for people making less than 20 an hour, they're going to be better off financially. And so that's why unemployment is going up so much, because yes, the economy is shut down, but it's because people realize that I got to lay these people off because it's temporary unemployment. It's not permanent unemployment. And so this data is real. We're happy to share this slide with you. And so hopefully this paints a little bit of the picture of the stimulus is being directed to the whole economy, not to certain pockets. Again, there are certain people still getting left out, business owners, real estate holders. But from an unemployment perspective, those that are in the lower level of wages are actually being helped out quite a bit through this program. Okay, so when we start looking through some of the data slides that we're gonna go through, and I want to make sure I stay on time and move us forward, but the economy is the single most important determinant in the direction of the stock market. And so you can see here, this goes back to 1990. GDP is the light blue, the dark blue is the S&P. So over a long period of time, they tend to trend in the right direction. So we're clearly going to have a slowdown in the economy, which is why the stock market anticipated that. But we think we'll actually recover and get back on track. Additionally, if we look at on the right-hand side, the stock market tends to bottom 4 months before the recession ends. And so that's why we don't get an all clear sign and then it's time to invest, this thing will usually happen early. It looks like we hit a nice bottom. We might retest it. I don't think we'll go down to those levels, but I could be wrong. But it looks like we're on a path of recovery, not only from the stock market side, but also the economic side. The economic recovery is going to be a lot choppier, and I have some slides in here that we're going to go through today. So one of the things is there's clearly sectors that have been the most impacted, right? And there's a big dispersion, right? And you guys all know this. There are certain of your friends, of your family, of your colleagues, super busy, busier than ever. And then you have people who are not busy at all because they're part of their job is totally shut down. So if you look at like business closure rate category, lodging, arts and entertainment, bars and lounges, sports and recreation, retail, right? You can see these are massively impacted. You go down to other places down here, let's say food and beverage, health, pet services, not as much. Then you look at year over year change in spending by business category. Food and beverage is up 44%, wholesale up 26%, pet services up 8%, healthcare up 7%, professional services up 5%, fast food's down a little bit. And then if you look at the transportation down 90%, no one's driving, no one's flying. Arts and entertainment, lodging, these are massively being disrupted, and that's really the concern with the overall economy. So if you look at, Raymond James put this slide together. I thought this was really fascinating. People keep talking about, are we going to have a V-shaped recovery, which means the economy goes down and right back up? Are we going to have a U recovery where the economy comes down and kind of spends time at the bottom and then recovers? I've had somebody kind of use the analogy, we're going to have like a Nike-shaped recovery, which is like the swoosh, which means we're going to recover, but it's going to take a long time. Raymond James, it was Larry Adam put this together. It's called the K-shaped recovery. It was way more complicated, and I like complicated stuff, so that's why I'm going to go through it. If you look at the K-shaped recovery, so let's assume we're all kind of starting at the beginning of this, and we're going to start saying, okay, what's going to happen? So as we go and look at the companies that are over leveraged, and have, that are in a business that's cash flow driven, which means they need to be open every day. The path that they're taking is kind of down this road to a dead end. Unfortunately, there's going to be a fair amount of businesses that will close, file bankruptcy, and not come back. This will be highly disruptive to many industries. Retail is going to be a big one. And a lot of local small businesses are going to be impacted by this, especially the ones that were over leveraged, which means they cannot sustain a 4-month period where the economy shut down. There is programs that are going, there's loans that are going to these businesses. However, if you were already on fairly tight margins or over leveraged, meaning too much debt, it's going to be hard to recover from this. And so clearly we're going to have some businesses that in parts of the economy that are just going to head right to the dead end. Whoops, let me go back. Airlines and entertainment and car sales. And so if we think about what's happening there, not many are traveling. There's not really much entertainment you can go to outside of your house. And car sales, auto sales, people aren't buying cars. And so, what's likely going to happen here is as they kind of head down this and we start seeing a little bit of recovery, I'm fearful that the airlines, entertainment, and car sales are going to have some lasting impact, where maybe people aren't going to spend as much in these areas, or they're going to delay travel. If people are worried about their own health, are they going to get rid of the middle seat on airlines? So this could be an area where we get a little bit of a head fake and then they go down into a more pronounced recession just based on consumers changing their behavior, changing their habit. Then we have another sector of the home improvements, elective surgeries, and technology. So that's where they head down and they kind of, they don't take the detour and they go right up to this growth phase. And so that's the area we're seeing. There's a bunch of areas. You're hearing how busy like Home Depot and Lowe's are. People are at home noticing they don't like things about their house and they're like, let's get these things fixed. And so we're going to see a resurgence in the economy there. Surgeries, there's a lot of stuff delayed. People still got to take care of themselves. That's going to have a boom when we come out of this. This is not going to be delayed forever. And then technology spend, the new technology, people upgrading their computers, their iPhones, whatever it might be. We're going to see massive technology spends, maybe improving the security of their home because they're working from home. So we're seeing a boom in those areas. And then the area that it never even went down. It literally kind of crossed over into this and just went straight up. And that's really looking at the medical supply business, e-commerce like Amazon, and streaming. So Netflix, I think they just announced a record growth in their supplier or the number of users. Same thing with Disney Plus. And so the streaming side of things. And so you have to look at this economy and different things. And as investors, one of the things we're trying to be a little bit more selective in this recovery is trying to cherry pick what we would call winners and losers. And obviously that's what we always want to do. The roadmap might be a little bit clearer for here because we know there's certain places that are going to have pronounced and prolonged headwinds. So hopefully this visual makes sense, albeit very complicated. Again, I like the complicated stuff. So thanks for bearing with me on that. The next 2 weeks are pretty impactful. So it already started today, but basically we're in the middle of the earnings season. So we're going to have first quarter earnings. So first quarter earnings, meaning everything that wrapped up at the end of March. We're probably going to see earnings numbers that are pretty good because for a lot of companies, just because they had January, February, where the economy was still functioning. March, obviously things changed, but we were still working, we were still doing okay. So we think that the first quarter earnings will probably be okay. What's changing is guidance. They're saying, what's the second quarter going to be? A lot of companies are removing guidance. They're saying, you know what, we're not even going to speak to what we think the future is going to be because honestly, we don't know. And so, but this is a big week. 65% of the market caps report. So 65% of the total size of the economy is reporting. And you can see some of the names very familiar. You have like Alphabet, Google, right? And then you have Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Visa next week. So next week's the big one. And so that's all the reporting. So that's going to cause probably a lot of volatility at the stock level where some companies blow out earnings and their stock price goes through the roof. And then you have companies that warn and they go down. So it's going to be a really interesting couple of weeks. So kind of stay tuned. We are deploying new capital right now for clients. And so, we're trying to be mindful of this, but, we don't have the perfect roadmap. So we're just trying to be flexible as things change. So this is what I would call the silver linings. And I pulled this from a Raymond James piece, so don't shoot the messenger. There's some interesting things in here. I know that sometimes you look through some of these and there can be some political motivation behind them. There's no political motivation on my part. But if you start thinking about some of the things, I mean, the economy shut down, which we obviously know is not sustainable, not good. We need to work. We need to be productive. We need to have an economy that functions. But if you actually look at what's been happening at a very high level, improved air quality. Like we've had tremendous amount of air quality. So, are we going to learn a lot from this and get to a point where, what can we do to keep this going for planet Earth? Climate change. So, because of the improved air quality and obviously not as many cars on the road, there's things that are improving from a climate change perspective. Reduction in crime. So a lot of people are off the streets. Crime has gone down in major cities tremendously. Now, there is some people speculating that this goes on too long, that might start to tick back up, but there has been a massive reduction in crime. Wildlife returning. You're starting to see, I think with the improved quality, you're starting to see, I think as Yosemite, the bears are out, and, you're starting to see some of these positive things, potentially because, some areas I know of our wildlife are closed. I know there's some parks that are open. There's some mini trails that are actually shut down. Increased hygiene. This is kind of a strange one, but, people are a lot more focused on washing their hands, not touching their face, doing these things to improve their personal hygiene. And what's actually happening is that flu cases are down substantially. Now, that could just be in how they're counting. I know some of the testing is they're looping stuff together, but flu cases are way down. I know in my household, we got 5 kids running around. Somebody's always sick because they're in school, they're getting germs. Nobody's sick, everybody's healthy. I'm coming into work, but we're doing our social distancing here, but our house is as healthy as it has been. And I think a lot of that is, number one, not having exposure to people, but also increased hygiene, even though some of the kids aren't getting ready for the day. And, so that's a whole other conversation. The benefits of telework. I think a lot of Americans spend too much time in their car every day. And so we're going to potentially be in a society where we can change some of that. And so there's a little bit more flexibility where people work and how they work. Reduce traffic, reduce accidents. I mean, if anybody has driven around Southern California, it's remarkable. You can get anywhere quickly. It's a little eerie out there. And clearly the reducing of traffic, that's not sustainable. Once we get back to normal, that's going to pick back up. And then one of the best benefactors is there's just less accidents out there, which is obviously amazing. Increased family time. I know that's happening at our house. Less distractions, less things that you're doing maybe personally, and you're spending a lot more time with family, which is fantastic. Technology and interaction. So, we used to view technology as a bad thing, people on their devices. Well, we're using technology for good. We're using things like Zoom video to host, cocktail parties or meetups with their family from all over the country. So we're changing the way our behaviors. And then the last one, pet adoptions. I think I saw it was like New York City, their shelters ran out of dogs. How cool is that? So I think people are really looking inward, trying to improve themselves. Hopefully we come out of this with a really great perspective on life. So thanks for, I kind of I changed it up here a little bit. I know we covered some economic issues, and I do want to share some positives because I think, we always have to look at the good in life and make sure we're making the best of things. And so hopefully, you can share this list, share this presentation, and maybe create some optimism and some happiness in other people. So with that being said, we are now on, I guess I'm going to go contact us here. I might just go back up to the silver linings and leave it here. So what I'm going to do, and kind of bear with me, we do have some questions. So just as a reminder, the questions are going to be, we have some things typed in. So I don't know if everybody can see that. So let me go through and I'm going to try to answer stuff live. So one question that we have is actually, I got a question beforehand. So let me, oh yeah, Jared actually asked that question. So, so this is, it says, it doesn't matter if someone works full or part-time to receive the extra $600 in unemployment insurance. So let me answer that live. So the key distinction is they have to be unemployed now, but yes, even part-time people can file for unemployment, and their California employment insurance or unemployment insurance is reduced substantially. But as far as I know, that $600 is available as a payment, even if somebody is working part-time. Okay. Another question, will someone be incentivized not to return to work before July 31st? So that's a really interesting question. I think that is one of the dangers of all the stimulus, is that does it change behaviors? Does it create a society that becomes too dependent on the government for bailout? And this goes for companies and for individuals. So I think absolutely it creates incentive for people not to work. Now, the one thing that's a little tricky, and I talked to an employment law attorney, usually what happens is if you are going to file for unemployment, that basically it has to be verified that you were not, that you were fired, you didn't quit. California is so backed up now that they're essentially not even enforcing that. And so there could be a lot of people who are truly not incentivized to go back to work. But technically, if the employer says, hey, we're ready to have you back, and you refuse, technically you shouldn't be able to claim unemployment. But because of the mass numbers, there's actually some fear that in that situation, that even though you shouldn't be able to claim it, you might still be able to kind of slip through the cracks. So I think absolutely it could incentivize that. Hopefully that's not the byproduct, but definitely that's one of the dangers with this. That's one of the dangers of some of the bailout. So I get another question here. How are you applying the economic roadmap under the surface to improve my portfolio? So great question. So the underlying question is that if we obviously manage client portfolios and everybody has different risk tolerances, but when you look at the underlying investments, what are we doing? And so we've actually been pretty clear with a lot of our individual clients is looking at the funds that we own and trying to be more particular about the sectors that we're in. And so we do believe in broad-based diversification, but actually with several of the changes that we're actually have made over the last few weeks or are in process and making, is that we're looking at our managers, our portfolio managers that are a little bit more concentrated, more sector specific. So instead of just owning the whole broad market, that they're being a lot more concentrated on what they own. And so by us then selecting them, it allows them to go ahead and invest in potentially the sectors like tech or healthcare, or those that we think will thrive in this dynamic. So those are some of the changes that we're making kind of on a macro level. And certainly we're willing to have more dialogue because clients are wanting to ask questions about this issue. And so that's really a one-on-one. How can we maybe adjust some individual portfolios, but on a global scale, that's how we're answering that, or how we're dealing with that. So hopefully that was helpful. Okay, so another question that we got in is speak about the impact of oil price deflation and its impact on the global economy. Wow, so that's a kind of a crazy one. So oil prices have plummeted. The demand has plummeted. We haven't seen this level of demand destruction, I don't think, ever in the history of the world. So oil prices, you'll see headlines that oil prices went below zero. Went negative. It's a lot of misconceptions because oil is not easy to store. So there's a big trading market that deals with these contracts, these future contracts. And so technically the May contract went negative today, I think, and yesterday. So without boring you guys all with the details, because frankly, there's even parts of it I don't comprehend, that I can't even wrap my head around how can it be negatively priced. But to the broader question that Diane's asking is around oil deflation. So oil deflation, obviously, for our oil companies is not good, right? Because if they have a product that they're actually have to sell for less, you can't drill it, you can't pull it out of the ground, you can't deliver it to customers and make a profit. We as Californians, unfortunately, have so much of our oil prices, or I should say our gas prices, are because of taxes. So the oil price deflation, in my estimation, though, outside of the oil industry, which only makes up about 3 or 4% of the S&P 500, so it's a very small percentage of our overall stock market, oil price deflation should actually help a manufacturing boom here in the US, because with oil prices down, we should be able to get back to building stuff here in the US, and we can fuel our factories, our plants at much lower prices. And so I look at this as a positive, even though for selective industries, especially in the oil industry, that is definitely a negative. So thanks for that question. Hopefully I answered it. All right, real estate prices, home price. So the question is on home price projection. That's a tough one. So, what generally drives home prices is demand, right? And demand is driven by affordability and driven by, and the affordability is driven by two things: interest rates and wages. I guess it should say three things, or the price of the home, your wages, and interest rates. So the big variable we don't know is, will the unemployment numbers change? Clearly at a 22 million, at a US based 22 million people unemployed, home prices should fall. But what I just showed you was that there's a lot of people, and that might not be the homeowner classification. There's a lot of people that are still going to be okay financially. So the home price projection, I haven't talked to real estate experts on this. I think per each individual house, if somebody is forced to sell it right now, they may have to sell it at a really bad price because there might not just be enough demand. I know that banks are still lending, so you can buy real estate. The real estate market is not frozen. However, on a house by house basis, we might see home prices actually decline just if you have to sell it. However, if you don't, and you can be patient about selling it, I don't think this is going to have much of an impact. If anything, with interest rates coming down, real estate probably will just maintain its growth. But real estate's also very local. Every market is different. So I don't, the impact in Los Angeles, we have a big arts and entertainment is a big part of our economy. So if that does not come back, then there's going to be impact on home prices in Southern California, because you'll have a big part of our city and county that will not go back to work at the same level. All right, are we buying oil? So, we own very little oil in the portfolio. A couple of our portfolio managers do have some oil exposure, but it's fairly minimal. I think that oil is probably one of those that you might be able to get a smoking deal, but one of the things that's difficult with oil is so many of these companies have tremendous debt. So they are an example of a highly levered, highly debt-ridden industry. And so I'm a little nervous. I think that it might be a little bit of a trap. I think oil prices are going to stay down for a significant period of time. So again, we own a little bit, but it's not something that we're actively adding to now. All right. So it sounds like you're not too concerned about retesting the market lows. What might you suggest if clients have that concern? Great question. So I know some of you follow the Dow and the S&P, so it's hard sometimes to illustrate this, especially in this format. But if you think about the stock market essentially dropped using the S&P or the Dow about 35%, and from the top to the bottom, and then it's recovered about 25-ish. And so we're still off from that. And so the idea is, well, what happens if we retest, if we go back to those levels? And so if we have clients that are concerned with that, there's a few things that we can do. So we are in the process of rebalancing accounts, which means we're going to be taking some of our stock out, or some of our bond allocation, selling it, and buying some of our stock allocation, because we need to get back into alignment. So for those clients who have that concern, then what we would do is we would hold off on our rebalance. We would just make sure, let's wait to see if things go lower, and then we could rebalance at a later time so that we're buying at a better price point. We have looked at these numbers. So we have clients that have been sending cash in. So we always have cash coming in, people funding retirement accounts, people just having assets, getting bonuses from last year, money coming in. So we've kind of taken this dollar cost averaging approach over the next 10 weeks, is that taking money and invest it in tranches, so that if the markets are volatile, we're not putting all that money at once. We've also set thresholds where we think the markets might go. And then we have clients who are on that list that say, okay, if it hits this level, I want to add more money. So it's kind of, I don't want to say it's a global decision at the firm level, because there's a lot of individuality to us helping our clients and making those decisions, but that's a great question. Hopefully I answered that. Thank you. Thanks, John. All right. So please discuss the impact of the oil price decline. Okay. So I've kind of dealt with that a little bit, but the impact is obviously it's going to hurt the oil. It's going to hurt the oil producers. But I think long-term, that should have a positive effect on our economy. Just like when oil prices were super high, and that was terrible because that puts a strain. So it's a weird thing, right? High oil prices are bad, but then low oil prices are bad. I look at low oil prices as a good thing, because that means consumers are going to pay less for their oil. You're going to have businesses pay less for their oil. The economy can function better with low oil prices. It's essentially like a tax rebate for individuals and companies, because their energy costs are going to go down dramatically. All right. If you normally have 2 jobs and are laid off of 1, do you still qualify for unemployment insurance? So I don't know the answer to that. If we use maybe a logical perspective, my guess is if you have a reduction of income and you're still working maybe part-time somewhere else, there's probably a place on the unemployment insurance to put that data in, and maybe you get a partial benefit. But I actually don't know if you qualify for that $600 that's at the federal level if you are still working. So that's a great question. I'm going to have someone on my team look into that. So Jill, I'll have someone look into to this and get back to you because it's a great question that I don't know the answer to. All right. So I have kind of our last question here, it looks like, and I think we're doing okay on time. Can you briefly explain tax loss harvesting? Okay. So great question. So if you think about when you invest, let's just talk about when you make money, right? When the accounts go up, if you sell something, you pay tax on that because you have a capital gain. Well, on the flip side of that is when you have a market that has gone down in value, especially if you purchased anything in the last 2 years, they probably now have a loss. So if you look at the loss and say, okay, you know what, I have this loss, I like this investment still, but I want to harvest this, which means I want to realize this loss because the loss then can be used to offset future taxes. So, and again, this is a good thing to check with your tax professional, and we can talk individually on this. But if you, so basically when you start talking about harvesting the loss, that means if you have something that's lost value, the idea is you sell it, you realize the loss, you buy something that is very similar. You can't buy something identical, but you reinvest it essentially on the same day in something identical. That way, when those investments go back up, you now have experienced a rebound in your investments, but you've booked the loss for tax purposes. So the loss can actually be used for a few things. It can offset capital gains. We actually had a client who got a big capital gain payout of a few $100,000 in January. She was going to have a big tax liability. Well, we did some loss harvesting, and that's the unfortunate part of this market environment. But we're actually going to be able to take that loss, offset that whole gain, and she'll have zero tax liability. Now, the account did lose value, so that's the silver lining in this is we'll be able to eliminate some of the tax exposure. But it's a strategy that we're employing. We're doing this for you real time. And if you have questions individually, that's a great question to call the office because every account is very different when it comes to tax loss harvesting. And this only applies to taxable accounts. This does not apply to retirement accounts. There would be no purpose to loss harvest in an IRA or 401k. Have I adopted a new pet during this? My kids are trying to get me to adopt a pet. They want to get a second dog. And I said, no way. So now they're talking about snakes, geckos, and hamsters. And so I don't know what's going to happen here. So I might lose this battle, but I'm gonna go down fighting. So thanks for the question, John. All right, well, I enjoyed the Q&A. I wish I could see all of your faces and have a little bit more engagement. I hope you guys enjoyed this session. Please provide feedback. We're always wanting to improve. If you have some topics or content that you'd like us to cover, I prepare for this usually every Monday, on a weekly basis, and so I'll try to just be fresh and relevant. So please share this. These are hopefully newsworthy information. I know the news out there is really hard to swallow. So again, thank you for joining me. I just wish the best to everyone and their families, and hopefully everyone's staying healthy and safe. And until next week, thank you.